But first, time for a reality check after all this hysteria on the weekend over Donald Trump. Now, it's true Anthony Albanese said exactly the right thing after the US president attacked Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelensky. Trump abused him as a hater in a shouting match on Friday and threw him out of the White House without signing a deal over Ukraine's minerals that could repay America and save the rest of Ukraine from being conquered by Russia.
And your people are very brave, but you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing, I'll be honest.
Threatening to dump Ukraine is ugly, but here's Albanese saying Ukraine can at least rely on us.
We will continue to stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes, because this is the struggle of a democratic nation versus an authoritarian regime led by Vladimir Putin, who clearly has imperialistic designs not just on Ukraine, but throughout that region.
Terrific. Well said. And European leaders in an emergency meeting in London on the weekend rushed to hug Zelensky and promised they'd also step up. They would even pay more themselves to guarantee Ukraine's security. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer talked very big.
We will go further to develop a coalition of the willing to defend a deal in Ukraine and to guarantee the peace. The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air. Together with others, Europe must do the heavy lifting. But to support peace in our continent and to succeed, this effort must have strong US backing.
It sounds great. And in fact, Europe paying more for Europe's own defence is exactly what Trump has wanted all along. And I guess he'd want us to pay more for ours. But here is the reality check. If Australia is standing with Ukraine, when is this government going to stop Australia sending billions of dollars to help fund Russia's war machine? Words are cheap, and we are now weak, underfunding our military, gutting our industry, especially with climate change policies. All this is embarrassingly clear from a new report from Finland's Centre of Research on Energy and Clean Air. It says the European Union is still paying more for Russian oil and gas than it sends in aid to Ukraine to save it from Russia. But the shocking kicker for us is that of all the countries in this report examined, countries talking tough on Russia, Europe, America, Japan, Canada, Australia, guess which one country buys the most products made from Russian oil? It's us, Australia. This report says Russia is getting around the West bans on buying Russian oil by selling it instead to giant refineries in India and Turkey, which love this cheap oil. And they then on-sell the petrol and other products to the West. And it says the single biggest buyer was Australia, whose imports from these refineries total 3.38 billion euros. That's $5.5 billion over the past year. Massive. Now, much of this petrol that we've bought is coming from the world's biggest oil refinery in Jamnagar, northern India, which now gets a third of its oil from Russia. That's in the dark red. And their operators just signed a massive new deal for more supplies from Rosneft, the Russian state-owned oil and giant. And that's, of course, being state-owned, a big source of cash for President Vladimir Putin's war machine. Now, are we going to stop paying for this petrol made from Russian oil? Would we think of paying more for our petrol, even more by getting it somewhere else? Not quite so cheap, as if. And the fact is, we are as dependent as hell. A quarter of a century ago, we had 8 refineries in Australia, turning oil, including our own oil, into petrol. Now we have just 2, small and in trouble. And we don't have enough oil as well, at all. We are sitting ducks. I mean, China could cut our sea lanes tomorrow. We'd be out of petrol in weeks. And we don't have a navy strong enough to do a thing about it. As we saw last week, we had just 3 Chinese warships circling Australia and firing guns. Our government needed a Virgin pilot to warn it about what was happening. And we're now going to stand with Ukraine. We can't even stand for ourselves, as Opposition Leader Peter Dutton pointed out today.
Australia is an island nation of 27 million people, effectively in the middle of nowhere, and we need to make sure that we have strong defences, and we need to make sure that we have functioning relationships with allies like the United States, because nobody can really predict what will happen, what threats will come our way over the next century, and that's why we need strong leadership in this country, and it's why I think people understand that the Prime Minister is just not up to the job.
As for Europe, now talking tough, also weak. A new report from the think tank Bruegel says if Trump does stop defending Ukraine, then Europe, to save Ukraine from a full-out Russian attack, would need more extra fighting vehicles than it has even now, and more missiles and the lot. I mean, Europe has been weak and lazy, leaving its defence to America, which is what Trump has been furious about for years. And now Britain and France say they'll defend Ukraine. With what? Without America. I mean, it's true that Russia in this war has been bleeding men. Its economy is in big trouble. Inflation is 9.5%. Supplies are running short. The economy really, well, people say this could be the last year when Putin can hold it together. But Putin with our oil money as well, has nevertheless created a war industry that the Bruegel report said made 220% more tanks in the past year, 150% more armoured vehicles and artillery, and more than 400% more long-range loitering munitions, drones and things like that. So that NATO, Germany, Poland, Denmark and the Baltic states all think Russia will be rearmed and ready to attack again, maybe some other country next time, within 3 to 10 years, maybe even sooner. And it has formed under Putin. Russia has attacked Chechnya, Georgia, Ukraine, first in 2014, again 3 years ago. It's also propped up the Syrian dictatorship until just this year and sent troops to back dictatorships in Africa. Vladimir Putin's even poisoned opponents in Britain and threatened nuclear war. That's how little he cares about the European threat. Europe is not going to be able to fight him alone. Not when it's got to fund these gigantic welfare states it's developed, and when global warming schemes are killing its industry like our schemes are killing ours. And with China backing Russia and preparing for its own war over Taiwan, that'll be bigger than Ukraine, believe me. Well, that's too big a job even for the United States. In the end, the US needs us too. It needs all of us to really step up, not just with social media posts, I stand with you. So I think Trump is going to eventually sign this deal with Ukraine for a share in its minerals in exchange for guaranteeing Ukraine's security in any peace deal with Russia. So sure, stand with Ukraine, I do. But with what? And can we even stand for ourselves? Waving goodbye to one industry after another. It's time we got serious, deadly serious.